set to start.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe it'd be nice for me to introduce you.
Yeah.
I'm Mary Ann Naif, part of the Resiliency and Sustainability Committee. We received a grant from GoPIF that will fund the study that Scott and his group is doing on, I can't explain it in 5 words, so I'm going to let you do that because it has to do with mapping and sea level rise and modeling. We have other members of the committee here today, Jay McCrate, Nancy West, and Dan and Howie on Zoom. So I think we might ask the members here from the staff to introduce themselves, and then we'll just turn it over to you.
That's good. That'd be great.
Okay. Margaret, you want to start?
Yes, I'm Margaret McIntyre, the Harpswell Town Planner. And I plan on doing a lot for the GoPIF part of the project. I plan on doing a lot of the reporting that's necessary, I think.
I'm Katie Neal. I'm the director for the Recreation Department and sit in on the Lands Committee for the town.
Paul Plummer, I'm the town's harbor master and marine resource administrator, which helps oversee the shellfish program.
Christy Ayana, the town administrator, and I do want to thank Mary Ann Naif and her Resiliency and Sustainability Committee. They worked hard on this grant application. It's one in a series of grant applications that we have received, and I think it's a really important topic, and we're really pleased that you put so much effort, you and your group, into getting these kind of planning grants. Thank you.
Ron? Would you like to introduce yourself?
No, okay. Ronald Ponziani, I'm the road commissioner in the town of Harpswell. And done a lot with the roads that have been washed out, trying to get them back to normal.
Yeah.
Very important.
I'm Tony Simmons, alternate code officer, representing the code department.
Nancy and Jay?
Oh, Jay McCray, I'm a member of the Resiliency and Sustainability Committee and the Fisheries Committee.
And I'm Nancy West, and I'm a member of the Resiliency and Sustainability Committee and the Harpswell Conservation Commission, which Mary Ann also chairs. Which, in addition to her other responsibilities, Mary Ann.
Great.
Not that she and I co-chair.
Thank you, Nancy.
Well, I guess I'll start out with our Stantec group. I'm Scott Hayward. I'm a coastal engineer and coastal modeler. I've been working with this model since I got out of college, basically. So it's very exciting to see this. You know, this is kind of when we had done this FEMA study. We were really hoping some of the towns would be able to, you know, get more funding to be able to do this kind of work with this model that we spent so much effort on. So, yeah, very excited to get this kicked off.
Nice. I'm Emily Chapman. I'm a coastal engineering specialist. I was not part of the original study with this model, but I'm really excited to start working on this part of the project.
Okay. And we have some people on screen, don't we?
Yeah, and Chris.
Yes, and Chris.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm very excited to get this kicked off. Chris Lashley, senior coastal engineer with Stantec. Like Emily, I was not part of the original study, but very excited to support Scott in this effort. My role in the project will be more of quality control. I have a really extensive background in numerical modeling, so pretty much just giving Scott that support to make sure that we can produce a very quality product. So very excited to meet you all. Thank you.
Okay. And you know, I realized that there's 2 other people on the screen that I kind of glossed over. Dan and Howie, do you want to just introduce yourself?
All right. I'm Howie Marshall. I'm chair of the town's Energy and Technology Committee and a member of the Sustainability and Resilience Committee. Or Resilience and Sustainability Committee, I guess.
Right. And I can see Dan's having a problem just getting his microphone on. Dan, I'm gonna step in and give your credentials for, if you don't mind. Dan is a member of the Resiliency Committee, and he's come on recently as also a member of the Planning Board.
You can't hear.
He can't hear us, can he? No, so,
Well, I'm hearing fine, so I think he must have his,
yeah, I think he might have some issues.
He needs Terry. Come and fix it.
We'll have him, ideal, he'll put something in the chat, and Amelia will pick up on it, maybe? Or Margaret will. Okay, I think we should get started, though.
Yes, of course. I was thinking, before we run through the project scope, it'd be helpful if the town of Harpswell could just discuss what they're hoping to get out of this study, and potentially any like key areas to focus on, areas that have been impacted by some of the recent storms we had, notably 2024 storms, and just some things that we can take note of now, so when we start digging into the data and really, improving this model, we make sure we don't miss anything. So, and I guess one other thing would be to understand kind of the requirements of the GoPIF grant, making sure that what we are providing to you fulfills all the requirements for the grant. So,
Maybe I can kind of give a little background that
That'd be great,
prompted
yes.
us to even look for the funding for this. My understanding is the modeling that's done now on sea level rise through FEMA is based on historical knowledge. And we are looking here, and I think that was part of the issue when Harpswell did its original different study to show that the layout of our town is not a flat one surface thing. And we were able to, through the process, able to show that depending on the structure and the topography, it differs in different parts of town. You might have a case where one is going to show having flooding. It might not be the case just because of just the way the makeup is with islands on the south side or on the west side. So this idea would be to take that, and we know that the modeling now is based on history. So the idea with this model was, which was put into our sustainability plan actually as one of our action items, was to find out and be able to have current update information for the town to use and for the people in town to use when they want to do a project. The marina at the end of Basin Point Road is a good example. They were going to be exposed to some astronomical amount of sea level rise. However, they had their own study done, and it turned out that they were not going to have the same issue that the modeling at that time showed. So our hope is to have a more accurate model for the townspeople and the town to use going forward. Long way to
Yeah.
say something short.
Okay,
but
so
that's the
understanding is
background.
the end product would be something that could be used for planning
Correct.
and not necessarily for flood map enforcement, but
No.
coastal resiliency and like community planning. Okay.
And if I could just piggyback on what Mary Ann was saying, so back when FEMA was looking at updating its mapping for Cumberland County, and that swept Harpswell in, they used a very generalized model, and so it sweeps in so many properties, and we were getting so
Yes,
many
yeah.
people saying, this is not accurate, the town needs to do something. So that's when we did hire Ransom to come in and do some more specific modeling, and it ended up removing a lot of properties from potentially being in the flood zone.
Yeah, and I remember working on that, and Harpswell definitely had the most extensive kind of like over prediction of the flood hazard as far as FEMA is concerned. But yeah, and we'd definitely be looking at, so that previous study was because it was purely a FEMA flood insurance rate map study. There are certain rules where when you're interpreting the modeling data that goes underneath that, where you look at that data and then you might get either the wave height or the height that the waves are running up. In Harpswell, for the most part, the flood hazard is almost always wave run up, right? It's like waves on the steeper shoreline that runs up a cliff and it either can damage property or infrastructure. FEMA has a rule where if that run up exceeds 3 feet over the ground, you cap it at 3 feet over the ground. So if you wanted to take those FEMA maps and project sea level rise, or like actually look at the true, run-up hazard that's underneath them, from the maps you can't get all that data. So one of our thoughts in this study is to essentially remove some of those, assumptions or kind of like post-processing of all that. And so we're showing more like the raw wave and hazard data in a more detailed, I guess, resolution as well. So we're hoping to bring that down, increase the number of locations or transects that the FEMA study had required. I remember in the original FEMA study, there were maybe only like a dozen transects in Harpswell, and we increased that to like, I think 30 or something. It added 2 or 3 times that number because there are so many more, turns and shapes. But in that previous study, we were limited to how many transects we could do because FEMA has all these requirements of different analyses that need to be done on each of those transects. And for this kind of study, if we're looking at just showing, future flood risk hazard, and it doesn't need to conform to FEMA's requirements, we just want to show like a useful tool online, that's something that it's much easier to do at a larger scale because you can automate the process. So you can increase the number of locations that you're looking at the flooding hazards. But
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
When you talk about the previous study, are you talking about the ransom study?
Yes, the ransom study.
And did you work?
Yeah,
sorry.
I worked
Okay.
at Ransom. So
Okay.
I worked with Nate Dill on that study. So, yeah. Yeah, I guess if you'd like, we can just start going through the scope item by item, and feel free if you have any questions as I run through this. I'm not going to read the full scope. I'm just going to kind of, in a few sentences, give a brief outline. But feel free to jump in with any questions as I move through. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let's see, so everyone can see it up there. Okay, so first task in the scope was correspondence meetings and project management. That is really just on our end to organize where the budget is and how our effort's going to go into the project. So we have 2 meetings outlined. This is one of them, and then the other meeting is once we finish this project, we want to present kind of the data and the maps that we've put together. And then, show kind of the results to you guys all. So, so that would be task 1. Task 2, so a brief background on the York and Cumberland County. I guess the previous study that we've been talking about, we can kind of refer to it as the York and Cumberland County study. So it was like the York and Cumberland County coastal hydrology study. That was based on an Army Corps study, which is called the North Atlantic Coast Comprehensive Study, which encompasses the entire northeast coast of the U.S. And they looked at a number of historical extratropical storms, so like nor'easter type storms, and then potential, like not historical, but hypothetical hurricanes. And up in New England, there is a risk of hurricanes, but our primary flooding source is the like extratropical storms. So that study had taken all those storms, and when we did the FEMA flood insurance, or our initial study, we looked at all the storms that they had included in the study for the entire East Coast and narrowed it down to just the ones that would impact the study area, or southern Maine. We used those to develop storm surge and wave height flooding statistics. And so the baseline, those storms and extratropical and tropical storms were, I think they ranged from 1970s, I think, all the way up to 2015. So 2015 is the most recent extra historical storm that was included in that study. And so since 2015, I think we've had at least 3 storms here that have had high enough storm surges and waves and other like damage attributed to that would influence the statistics, at least looking at like extreme 100-year or more extreme storms here. So most notably is like winter storm, I think Grayson, which was in 2018. That was a pretty severe one. And then we have the two storms that were back-to-back last year. Those were definitely storms that we would like to include in this. So what we're going to do is look back at any of the storms that have occurred in the past 10 years or so and select a number of them to include in this study. So that'd be task 2, is basically selection of those storms. And then the next step would be to improve the model grid. So the model grid, when we developed it, we used kind of the most state-of-the-art approach for developing a high-resolution hydrodynamic and wave modeling domain. But the problem was, when we were looking at Harpswell, the only data set that was available for LiDAR data was it was from 2006. It was like a FEMA LiDAR study where they had flown over and captured, elevation data for much of the Northeast. But the problem with that survey was it included a lot of water elevation returns. So when they flew the drone, they flew it at like mid or high tide. And so in Harpswell, all we had was data from like mid-tide over land, and then we had to tie that in with the bathymetry data, which is like what you'd see on a nautical chart. And so everything in the tide range was missing from the model. And we did our best to include what we could, but it was for the most part a rough interpretation and kind of like trying to integrate the best data we could into that. So since then, there's been, I think, 2 different LiDAR data sets that have come out that are much, much better. And I have those pulled up in the background, so I can share those in a few minutes. And we can compare just, the data that we'd be able to improve the model with. So once we've selected the new storms, we're going to take the updated LiDAR data that's available and bring that into that old model, and hopefully improve the offshore, or kind of like that intertidal data set. So we'll improve the model in that way, and then once that data is included, we're going to rerun we're going to include those selected storms in the data set from the original study. So I guess that's task 4 would be the wave modeling. So once we have the updated wave data, the updated grid, and then the updated storm set, we can rerun the grid with those new storms and then recalculate the extreme statistics, so we can do our best to improve the understanding of the present day flood risk. And so that would be essentially the same data that was in the or the same levels of data that are in the FEMA study. So we looked at the 100-year flood level, but also as part of the study, we included the 10-year, 50-year, and 200-year in case the community was interested in using those for additional studies. Or what we could do with this study is essentially recalculate all those based on the updated storms and updated model grid. And a few other things is if there are any areas in Harpswell that we want to improve the model, we can focus on those and try and increase the resolution in any critical harbors or downtown areas, or if there's any infrastructure that's of interest, we can, if we have that info now, we can include that when we go to kind of update the model grid. And then task 5 would be including sea level rise in this. So then we would be taking the flood statistics, which tells you, today, if a storm were to happen, how high would the flooding be? But then we also want to include sea level rise with that. So we would basically rerun some of the storms with the higher water levels to understand if there's a nonlinear component to the sea level rise. So if the sea level rises 1 foot and the same storm happens with that 1 foot of sea level rise, does that produce a 1 foot higher flood everywhere, or does that, increasing the sea level rise, is there a 1.5 foot increase of the flooding? So there's that kind of nonlinear aspect is something that you can look at with these coastal hydrodynamic modeling. So that would be the sea level rise component. I think also when we are looking at sea level rise, we want to understand what scenarios Harpswell wants to include in this study. I don't know if there were anything, any specific flood depths that were proposed for the GoPIF grant or anything. I know Maine has the Maine won't wait recommendations for 2050 and 2100. So those values, for the final product, we could look at just including those levels, but we could have other, if you wanted to look at only 1 foot of sea level rise, or if you wanted to look at a more severe scenario, we can include that as well. So, yes.
So you can include for sea level rise, you can trust the LiDAR data isn't going to change very much.
Yes, yeah.
Can you also include a factor for predicting stronger storms? Of the sea level rise, or is that
would
complex?
I think it would be fairly complex. A lot of the studies have kind of assumed if stronger storms were to occur, you could attribute that to an increased flood hazard statistic. So if you wanted to look at potential for future, more severe storms, you could, rather than looking at the 50-year storm, you could look at the 100-year storm. I think if you wanted to consider stronger storms, you might need to do a whole new study with all new storm set and then update the hydrodynamics. That's on the scale of the full project that was done back in 2017. So I think oh yes.
I was just going to mention, Scott, that we do have the amounts noted.
Okay.
We have, and I'll give them to you later, I can't pull them up right now. We have all the modeling we've done on sea level rise. We're using the same standard, which is
Okay.
the GoPIF.
Yeah. So it might be the 3.9 feet.
Yeah, it's
and the-
2.9, and I think we might even have done a 6 foot as well.
Okay,
So,
yes.
What is the change of the high water level normal in the last 100 years or the last 60 years?
I'd have to pull that up, but I think maybe, I don't know, maybe quarter foot in Maine or something like that.
Quarter of a foot?
Yeah,
That sounds right.
yeah.
I just
I'd have to pull it up on the NOAA
Yeah,
page for Portland tide, or the Portland,
Portland tide gauge.
tide gauge would have it.
okay. I have other questions, but I'll wait.
Yep. Yeah, so one of the things that some of the other studies haven't included, but we're hoping to include in this, is after the sea level. So if you imagine the flood maps being based off of like a combination of three things. There's a flood depth, there's wave conditions, and then there's the like wave run-up, which is dependent on the flood depth and the wave conditions. The kind of final task of this project would be to take the flooding statistics, which are some combination of severe storm and sea level rise, which would give you a depth, and then the wave conditions, and then estimate the total run-up height, or like the nearshore wave conditions. So the modeling that goes behind creating the maps is generally very computationally expensive, takes a lot of time to run on computers. It's very, very large data sets. The final task of this project would be to take in like a nearshore, very small range, and essentially compute like high resolution statistics and wave heights and wave run-up for all those scenarios, like at each location where we've drawn a transect. So we can take that 2D modeling and turn it back into like a one-dimensional transect to determine the high, like in very near shore parcel level, or like every couple hundred feet along the entire shoreline, what the flooding might be with each scenario. So let's say you decided to look at 2 sea level rise scenarios, and you wanted to look at the 10-year, 50-year, and 100-year, storm conditions. Then you could also understand the attributed wave run-up for all those different scenarios on top of the maps that would show all that data.
I guess I'll ask you one more
Yep.
thing. Seems that in the normal world, things stay about the same, but when you get the perfect storm,
Yeah.
is when you get a lot of trouble. And what you're dealing with, you're talking about the rising water, but it's really not the rising water, I don't think. I think it's the wind and everything acts together.
Mm-hmm.
You got a full moon, you got a strong 70-mile-an-hour wind, and it's high tide.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we get into trouble.
Yeah, and I think that's captured in the statistics to some extent, because looking at what are the chances of the high tide happening at the same time as the storm that hits?
Right.
Right. In Maine, when we have such a high tide range, if the storm hits at dead low tide, it's gonna, even if it's the strongest storm we've seen,
Right.
it might not be as bad as the less severe storm that hits at the highest tide of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's something we saw with those 2 storms last year, right? The first storm was a higher tide. There was less storm surge with it, but it also had waves that were coming from a very unique angle. It was like straight south.
Like a southeast.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was coming right directly in.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I haven't said a lot about this, but the Bailey Allen Bridge, a lot of those crib stones, crib rocks, kind of
Got
loosened
moved.
up.
Yeah.
Got real dangerous, fell out.
Wow. Okay.
And I took a lot of time standing there looking at that one day,
Yeah.
taking pictures of it, and I thought, what is the difference between now and before they rebuilt the
Mhm.
bridge? Because they rebuilt it exactly. My grandfather actually worked on that when they built it.
Okay.
And so I was kind of interested in seeing what would make that change.
Mhm.
It's because when that bridge comes across, it comes down and matches up to the tide,
Mhm.
to the road, I'm sorry. And then it's probably, I don't know, 20 feet over here, and it might be 4 or 5 feet over here. The thing that's different is it's got a 6-foot walkway on it, concrete walkway.
Mm.
Can you imagine the hydraulic from that storm hitting directly right in there? It gets under that thing and just lifts it hydraulically right up in the air. I'm wondering if you consulted any engineers that design things to have like a breakwater ahead of that.
Yeah.
Or something, one of the other places, somebody said you need bigger rock.
Yeah.
You're not using big enough rock. Go down to the end of Ocean Street off Washington Avenue on Bailey Island and look at the rocks that storm moved. They were like huge, laying out on the rock, just ripped them right out of the banking. Because there was relentless water. Water
And
is
yeah,
relentless.
and that storm also came from a real unique angle.
Yeah.
I think
Southwest.
it was the west. Yeah, had like a
Yeah.
southwest component to it. I think.
Well,
what
it
was
came around and came right in and hit right on the north end of that bridge.
Yeah.
Which is, that's on the east.
Yeah.
And the wind comes from just like this, right in under it.
I'm sure that when we include the wave statistics from that storm, maybe not the surge, but the wave data, it's gonna change. It'll update. It'll make a big change to the flooding, risk for Harpswell for that, just from that storm, because I don't think there's any in the storm set that was originally included. There wasn't anything quite like that. So including that storm, I think, is going to make a big difference and give a better understanding of those potentially happening in the future, and with sea level rise on top of it too.
It's the only storm I could think of right off the top of my head is in 1954, there was a storm, Hurricane Carol. And just below my house, I live right on 123 down on the south end of ways, it ripped out elm trees that were like this big, just blew them right out of the ground. And that was quite a storm.
Wow. Yeah.
Went right down through the roof of the house, and the guy was laying in his bed, and the limbs come right down.
Scott, I think that's one thing that, we're bringing out. That's one of the things we're going to find, like the storms in 2024. In the winter came out of the west, southwest
Yeah.
more. Very unusual for us to have a storm coming out of that direction. And possibly, this is going to happen more frequently. We're going to get different types of storms at different times of the year. That ideally, what you work on will help us plan for that and figure out how to be resilient to that.
Yeah, totally.
In my teenage years, when I was 16, I worked on a wharf on Ash Point Road. And when they come around southeast like that, a lot of the fishermen would all take their boats and take them up into the cove, up into Tide Mill Cove. And they'd anchor them up in there. The boss used to say, the guy in the business was Morris Moody. But anyway, he said, when that comes around southeast, you gotta start taking care of your boats. Because it ripped his wharf out twice.
Okay.
We had to rebuild it.
Yeah.
And it's all those kind of storms that come in off that.
Different angles and.
Comes
yeah.
right down into that cove
Yeah.
perfectly.
Okay.
Okay, Christie?
Well, I was just thinking, as Ron was talking about the Cribstone Bridge situation, that we need to share this modeling information with DOT.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of concern about bridges in Harpswell, and those major bridges are
Yes.
maintained by DOT.
Okay.
And so I think that will be very helpful, looking at 10, 50 years, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
What-
yeah.
What do we need to do to plan for the future for this public infrastructure?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I just got his name the other day because of this bridge. One of the selectmen was asking me what's going on, how come they were all ready to finish it? You might as well know it, most of you are from Hartsville. And how come they just had all the paving stuff there and then it disappeared? Well, because it's a back order on the drains that go in the bridge. And they should be back in, and they were hoping to have it started by the 1st of October, so they can get up there and finish it. But they couldn't finish it because they couldn't have the things they needed.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess maybe I helped bring that to their attention about 3 or 4 years ago, because I found erosion on this side of the bridge. It took the whole side of the bridge out. You could see the whole abutment all exposed. And they were down there the next morning starting to fix it.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead, Scott.
So I guess to kind of wrap everything up, it looks like in the proposal we had kind of outlined a few flood exceedance probabilities to include with sea level rise scenarios. So I think we have the 10-year storm event, 50-year storm event, and the 100-year storm event. And then for the sea level rise scenarios, we have the present day, so that's 0 sea level rise, and then 2 future flooding scenarios. So I guess we'll circle back and make sure we have.
I will, because we
correct
have that
ones.
stated actually in our sustainability plan as well.
Okay,
so-
yeah.
And there are the 2.
Okay, we'll make sure we have those right ones. Yeah, and then I guess to follow up the schedule, we had kind of outlined, first month would be kickoff, which is this. By month 3, we should have the first kind of milestone deliverable done, which is, I believe, that's the updated storms.
The grid.
Yeah, and then the grid updates. So we should have that. That would be end of November. Sometime in November. And then deliverable 2 is the flood statistics, I believe, right?
Statistics and sea
Yep.
level rise.
Yep, and sea level rise. So that, and then we'd be aiming to do that in 5 months. So that's January. And then hopefully have the final product and our kind of wrap-up meetings and stuff in April, I think, of
Yep.
next year, April 2027.
So it's at 8 months, I think,
Yep.
originally. And the grant has a 1-year time, so that
1
would
year.
give us 4 months to, to publicize it and get the word out and start
Okay,
talking about
great.
it as well.
Yeah.
Can we go back to 3 and the key areas in Harpswell to focus on in this study?
Yeah.
Do you need a list of roads? Because we have identified roads that are of most concern, town landings, recreational spaces. Do you need some lists from us about key areas?
That would be great, yeah.
Okay.
If you could
Yeah.
give us addresses or coordinates for each location.
Yeah.
If any of you have access to Google Earth or Google Earth Pro, and you wanted to just save a whole bunch of pins and send them over, that'd be great. We can include those. So like here's a tool that we had put together as part of the York and Cumberland County FEMA appeals. This is in Google Earth, so if you were to try and like host this on Town of Harpswell website, it would be pretty difficult. But our goal is to put everything into a format that you could include in GIS, ArcGIS. So if you wanted to have a GIS viewer, or you wanted to include, if you have like a town GIS layer, you can have that as like a layer that you can open up and select and browse through. But we'd be looking to do something very similar to this, that this would be one of the scenarios, right? This is I think this one is the 50 years, so this would be the present day 50-year significant wave height flooding risk. And this would be based on the 2015 statistics. So updating, I'm sure if we updated the storm set, you'd see a lot more waves getting in between, Orr's Island and is this West Harpswell, South Harpswell? Yeah.
Harpswell Neck, yeah, South
Yeah.
Harpswell.
So getting up here, all these southwesterly bays, I'm sure you'll see much, much higher wave exposure in those. And one thing in this model, the near like Cook's Lobster, the Bailey Island Bridge here, was definitely an area that we wanted to include really good data, but the LiDAR data was not great when we did the original study. So I think having updated bathymetry here and improving the grid resolution here will be very helpful. If I share this too, this is a quick example of, and I'll pull this up. This is the 2006 LiDAR data set. So if you look at this, and it's hard to see, but on the left screen here, this is all elevation in meters. So if we zoom in anywhere, has the opposite zoom feature as Google Earth, so it's tricky. But almost nowhere, like there's almost no data below 0 feet. So at like mean tide and lower, we had no data in any of these areas. And so I think what happened was, because there was no data there and also very little bathymetry data, some of the areas were deeper than they should have been in the model. So when we include the most recent data set, which I'll pull up right here, let me turn this one off and then zoom to this. And you can see this is the same color scale. So in the last one, it didn't have any of these reds that go all the way down to -10 meters, so like 30 feet deep. All these kind of shallower areas or these ledges and small islands here will be included in the model updates. And I think to add to that, one of the things that was not included in the original FEMA study, and it was kind of one of the key reasons we included this in the appeal, was these islands off of like Orr's Island, like to the right on this screen, were completely out. They didn't even include those in the original wave model. And so any waves that were coming from the southeast would just pretend like it was deep water.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this area just north of Bailey Island had much, much, much larger wave heights in the original FEMA study than we saw in our study. Yes.
Are these maps an overview of projections from any wind direction? Or how's that work?
Yes, they include-
Because this is entirely dependent on where that storm's coming from.
Exactly. Well, this is LiDAR data, so this is like elevation data for Harpswell. But the study includes a number of historical storms. So those storms come from the south or the east and have wave and wind direction that changes during the storms. And each of the storms come from a little bit different angle, and so by including the entire storm period, it is including waves coming from all directions. But what we don't do is include like take the maximum wind direction from, let's say, like, some like simpler studies would take a windrows or like a location with wind data, and they'd say, okay, here's the maximum wind direction we get. And then they'd take that wind direction and apply it in all, or wind speed, and then apply it in all directions. And that generally gives like an artificially high flood depth and wave height, and it kind of overpredicts the flooding risk. These studies, by including past storms, they include kind of both the chances of like when do they occur with tides and how they move with, how the wind directions change over the period of the storm. It includes all that in the statistics. And really just like the more storms you have, the more you're able to consider different directions and different, different intensities, different tides that the storms may occur. So all that is, can be captured by including more and more storms. So including this extra 10 years of storms from 2015 to 2024 is going to be a big improvement, I think, to this model.
Yeah. When you didn't see much storm damage on them two storms on the west side of Harpswell?
I'm not sure. I wasn't,
Because
tuned into
sometimes you're
Harpswell,
talking
so-
about the wind changing, and I can remember
Yeah.
hearing old fishermen saying, well, don't worry, in this afternoon, the wind's coming around the western, and when it does, it'll flatten that right out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's-
when it does change, you can go out and do what you gotta do. And, but on these big, like I say, the perfect storms, that's when there's not a heck of a lot you can do about it. You can protect your land if you can get enough permits to put barriers up, and they need to be not smooth and pretty, just they need to be maybe a little corrugated, like, so it'll break the flow of the water when it comes back out over instead of going up over.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think, with these, like the storms changing directions and stuff, that, you know, the damage can happen in 1 to 2 hours. It's during the peak of the storm when the waves are coming from that one direction and the wind's coming from that one direction. And these statistical studies look at, you know, for every area in the map, they look for the biggest waves and then the you know, the highest storm surge during the storm. And then they take those and include those in the statistics. And the biggest, you know, the largest waves and highest surge in one area of Harpswell may be different than in a different area of Harpswell during that storm, but what happens is that during the run, the peak statistics from that, or the peak water levels and waves from that storm are captured. And then they are included, like during that storm, the water peaked at this elevation at all these different locations. And then we include that all in the statistics, so.
That's what
it is able
happened
to
in
capture
the
that,
last
yeah.
storm that we had, the 2 storms back
Mhm.
to back. We replaced the road that was gone, just about 75% of it.
Okay.
And they had to close it up. We had to get people out of there.
At the Bailey Island Bridge?
It was the
Little
Little
Island
Island
Road.
Road.
Little
Island.
Road.
Okay,
Yeah, it was a causeway,
okay,
and we filled that in. The next day, it came up again, and just, it didn't bother what we'd already fixed.
but it's
But it
different areas.
broke over the top of it, and went over, and when the water come off the other side, it went down and washed 3 places out on that side. But it wasn't nothing because of that side, but the water went up over what we'd fixed, and it washed that out.
Okay,
We had to go back and fix it the next morning.
Okay.
But usually them storms last about, like you say, 22 hours to
yeah,
2 days maybe,
yeah,
only when the tide's high.
yeah, yeah, it's only,
It's all storm surge.
And
4
that's-
hours
That was
maybe.
the perfect storm.
yeah.
Scott, you had mentioned wanting some particular spots that might be good to test, and I'm going to suggest that you talk with Tony and Codes and
Yep.
Tim, as well as Paul Plummer, who is the harbor master, because I think they have a really good sense. Codes has a pretty good sense of where there was a lot of damage in the last time. Just might be good touch points for you.
Definitely, yes.
And just as an aside, the Conservation Commission had a picture post project. We have been taking photos for like 6 years on the road crossings and culvert crossings. And as you've said, you pretty much know where to go and get pictures just by the wind direction.
Yeah,
And the interesting thing, in the last storm, it was hitting all sides of Harpswell,
yeah,
as well as just from the east or just from the south or the north.
okay. Yeah, so in, here, let me pull another thing up that I saved from our last study. So during the York and Cumberland County appeals, we were doing that study, and that Winter Storm Grayson occurred, and we were able to capture a whole bunch of photos and use that storm. We didn't include it in the statistics because it wasn't originally included in the NAC study, but we used the modeling results from that to validate our model. And so I think we have some figures. This is from the ransom presentation. Here, I'll snooze this. So this shows the meteorological forcing that we used. And then looking at the water level validation, you can see the model almost perfectly matched the water elevation in Portland and in Wells. But we didn't have tide gauges everywhere, so what we did afterwards is had all the towns send us photos, and we estimated kind of how high the waves and the water levels got during those storms. So we had like the Portland, this was Bailey Island.
Yeah.
And then in Portland, this was right down the street from our office. So we walked down and took photos during the peak of the storm. This was Spurwink Road in Scarborough, Route 1. This is Kennebunkport. That car has certainly got some salt water in it. But if you have any photos from the 2024 storm, either of the two,
We do.
Yeah.
I'd definitely like to take some of those photos
I
and
got a ton of them on my phone.
okay, great. Yeah, send them to us, and what we'll do is we'll try and validate the model with those photos. If we need to go out and kind of estimate what the storm surge level is at either roadways or other kind of visual keys we'll use. But yeah, we'll do something similar to this with, we have the Grayson model, which we'll probably end up rerunning because we don't have the same meteorological data, but we'll use both Grayson and that the 2024 storm to validate the model and make sure it's producing accurate results, and then include those in the storm sets and yeah, update the grid. And we should get a lot of really good data out of this.
Yeah.
Great.
Tell me again what you were, what you're anticipating for sea level rise, or what you're projecting on your data. that
So
you predict.
generally what we would,
Scenarios.
yeah, rather than trying to recommend like a projection, I think it makes more sense to, and there's a, what is it? The Woods Hole like coastal flood risk model for Mass. They did a similar thing where they, rather than saying the storm surge or the sea level rise is going to be 3 feet, what they did was they took their model and they gave it sea level rises of like in 1 foot increments. So then if the projections of sea level rise change in the future, the resulting model is still usable. So if they say, oh, we're actually expecting more sea level rise, you can say, well, our model is 1 foot of sea level rise, 2 foot, 3 foot, and you can change just look at a different figure, and reinterpret the results rather than trying to say, okay, this is the 2050 sea level rise. I think in this we shouldn't call it the 2050 we can follow the Maine won't wait recommendations, but I think we should just call it 3.9 feet of sea level
Exactly.
rise, or 4 feet of sea level, or 5 or whatever.
We have pretty much decided in the past that because of the type of it's not flooding so much, but storm surge, that the amount of money that you're going to spend on infrastructure, you're not going to do it at 1 foot increments. So we have been starting with, I believe, 3 feet.
Start with 3, yeah.
And then we would have, if we had a second model, go up to
Yeah.
6.
Yeah, I think 3 and 6 would be good.
And
you
those
can
are the two
interpolate
numbers I
between
want to check for you, to
Yeah.
just be sure.
Yep, I think that's what we would aim for. So the model that is the baseline that's basically used for this, they were designed to run with no sea level rise and just to calculate
Exactly.
the flooding statistics. But what we've done is you just add the sea level rise and you rerun all the storms, and you look at, whatever storms did still run that didn't blow up. You take those results and you look to see if there's a trend, and then you run it for another increment of sea level rise, and maybe there's even less storms that run, and you interpret that trend across the whole grid, and you can get a good kind of interpretation of how sea level rise would change the flooding, the future flooding across the model. So we'll do a similar thing here, and then we can, you can rerun the grid with 1 foot and 3 foot of sea level rise, and then extrapolate to whatever sea level rise we want to use for the final product.
Sounds good.
And I know we focused a lot on talking about public infrastructure, which is important, and planning for that. But we have recognized in Harpswell, there's a lot of private roads. And a lot of people don't really think in terms of those impacts down the road. So I think there's that whole educational component that maybe will come out of this tool, and we'll be able
Okay.
to show people and help them better prepare, the emergency preparedness piece. Like if people need to get off a certain area because, they're not going to be able to.
Because the roads can be flooded.
Yeah,
or
then
however
then
long.
we need to do more to predict that and communicate that.
Okay.
Right.
Is FEMA loosening up on helping a lot of people get some of their wash fixed and stuff?
Some of their what, wharfs?
Yeah, where they have to work fishing every day.
I'm not sure if they're private, I would guess probably not. I think
Yeah.
unless they were insured, then it, you know, if it got damaged, then insurance would cover it to some extent. But I know FEMA does like the, you know, the disaster, like reconstruction grants and stuff. We're working with like City of Portland right now. They have a number of locations that got damaged in those storms
Right.
last year that they're, you know, Portland is rebuilding them and designing and rebuilding, and then they get reimbursed by FEMA after the project's done.
Yeah, they treat public infrastructure, FEMA treats that different from
Mm-hmm.
Private, yeah.
individual or business
Right.
infrastructure.
yeah.
That's handled differently, like small business administration loans, that type of thing, for a small business.
Just seems so hard that some of these have been there for hundreds of years, and just that one storm in 24 hours wiped them out. And it's too bad that they can't come back with something if they need to.
Okay.
Very good.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? And
I do have a quick question.
would you use the microphone, please, Nancy?
I'll try.
Hold it till it goes green.
Does this work? Yes.
Yeah.
I'm assuming and hoping that on your final models, you'll have like a black outline of the edge of the land at an average tide so that people can say, this is where my house is, because we all do that based on roads and the shoreline. Because the color models are great, they're incredibly informative, but I know that people will want to see where they are
Oh,
with
totally,
respect
yep.
to all of these predictions. Thanks.
Yeah, well, if it's a GIS map, we could include it and have some transparency in it, so you can have an aerial image below it. But we're also hoping to make a tool that basically gives the data, you know, the map's great, but at the end of the day, you might want to know how high the flood, you know, the storm surge and how high the waves are, and then how high the wave run-up is right at your property or like near it. So what we'd like to do is create a whole bunch of points that you can click on, and it's just like a table with all the data from this study. And so you could reference back, look at a map, and then click on, you know, that one layer, that table that would be in GIS, and it could either you could have it linked to like a folder that, like a zip folder that gets downloaded that just has like a couple figures that show like a wave envelope or wave run up along the shoreline, or it could just have a table with a whole bunch of information in it. So
That's a good question, because I'm thinking about how it would be good. For example, we have a map right now that we've been using for 6 years that's based on, you know, old data, basically. But it's tied to the parcel maps so that you can see where your house would fall.
yes, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's something that could be incorporated easily, that would make the availability for someone who, if they're building a house, for example, or they're looking at property, could look and see how they're going to fall
Yeah, today and with,
and what they should plan for, because that would be
Yes.
really, we're hoping that could be really, really helpful.
yeah, I agree. I think, and that's, I guess, do you have like a town GIS map viewer on your website? Okay. Yeah, that's so-so.
We do, but all of our data is internal except our shoreline zoning map.
Okay,
It's something that we aim to change in the next year, but to Mary Ann's point, we'll have a layer of the tax map. So you'll be able to put the tax map on in addition to the flood zoning, so you'll be able to see where your property boundaries are.
Because that's the value, I think, for, like Christie brought out, 68% of our roads are private.
yes, yeah.
That's the value of this project, because we can have information for people to help themselves, and it should be easy for them.
I think the way to sum that up, is that it's not just the town committees and the town professional staff who will be using this product, but I'm guessing that all of the town residents will also be an audience.
Yeah, okay.
Nancy, your mic wasn't on, I don't think. I don't think your mic was on.
What was showing green? Oh, well. It didn't sound to me like it was on.
Did you want to see if there were any questions from?
Yeah, I was wondering if there's any questions from those of you on Zoom.
Yeah, I'll stop sharing here.
I have a few. I don't know that we need to go into a great deal of detail, but I had a couple of questions that I scribbled down as we were going. Early on, Scott made mention of what seemed to be particular locations on the shoreline. I think he was calling them transacts.
Yes.
Is that right? I don't know what that, what is transact?
Yeah, so here, I'll just share screen one more time, and it should help. I could explain this easier if I just pull up this map. Yeah. So I'll go back into this map that illustrates kind of like this map specifically shows the 50-year wave height envelope. But this doesn't tell you really, if you look at this and keep zooming in and keep zooming in, it ends at the shoreline. It doesn't actually extend this data all the way up the cliff or to each parcel to where it would, during the storm, if you, imagine you're looking at out to the sea, this is showing the height of the waves offshore that are moving towards you. But the resulting waves or forces that do damage are the waves that run up the shoreline, mostly in Harpswell. So what we would do is draw basically a line along the shore. This is just a random parcel, for example, but it would take results from this map and then calculate in high detail what the waves and how high the waves are going to go up that shoreline. And so a transect is basically breaking down the model from this 2D map to a more high resolution detailed, like one-dimensional analysis or like another calculation. And so
Okay, I guess I'm just asking I don't even know what the term is. I don't know how to spell it. I don't know what is it short for something?
Transect, it would be TRANSECT. It's
Okay.
like a surveying term. It's a cross section of like an elevation profile. Right?
Okay,
So
that was my question. I've never heard the term before. I don't want to spend a lot of time on any of these. I just want to raise these as questions that I came up with. There was a good point that the town has a list of roads and landings that are of particular concern that we've identified, but I just want to make sure that Stantec should be free to suggest other locations as they go through, that we shouldn't just say, these are the areas we want to study, because we may have missed some.
Yeah, definitely.
And then I don't understand why it's only the non-tropical storms. Is that because hurricanes generally aren't that severe by the time they get this far north?
Yes. They generally, by the time they make it up to New England, they're less severe or less intense than the extratropical or nor'easters. Also, they're much shorter duration. So if a hurricane were to hit coastal Maine, they're moving so quickly by the time they get up here that they generally might only last for 6 hours during the peak of the storm. And with Maine's tide range, the chance of those storms hitting at high tide are much less. So it's a combination of them being less severe for the average hurricane, and then, for the, I guess, future flood risk, present day flood risk, the hurricanes are generally, they dominate like looking past the 100-year storm. So if you were interested in what is my 1 in 500-year storm that might come through, then it might be a hurricane that's causing that flooding, because the nor'easters kind of have like a maximum intensity that they could generate surge here. So it's really, what are the chances of that nor'easter coming and hitting at the perfect tide, like you were saying, like the perfect storm. Whereas the hurricanes are, it's just so much less likely that they would hit Maine. And so, you know, and with intensity. So the ones that may hypothetically hit Maine with that intensity are going to affect less of the coast, and also still have a chance of not hitting at high tide.
And I guess the other question, I think you said that maybe it was the LiDAR or the drone information was based on mid-tide. Is that right?
Yeah, the 2006 LiDAR data set that was surveyed was not taken at low tide. So it was taken at like mid-tide, and it only includes data from, you know, it also includes the top of the water. So it almost like the data is polluted with that. So in order to use the data set, you actually have to crop out even more of the elevations, because you don't want to risk accidentally taking water elevation and putting it into your model. So,
And I guess it seems to me that for evaluating the threat, the high tide mark is most interesting, because that, you know, that's where we're going to see the greatest, you know, wash up onto shore. Is that part of this also? Or, I mean, because it seems like, you know, the extreme circumstances always going to be at high tide if you have the severe storm net. And
yeah.
I also like looking out my window here. I'm not terribly worried about that, because at low tide, it's 3/4 of a mile from my waterfront to the edge of the water. And a lot of the coves in town are tidal and shallow. And that's going to make a huge difference as compared to places where, you know, the water is deep right up to the shore. And so, you know, the difference in the shoreline between high tide and low tide might only be a matter of a few feet, as opposed to 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
So
the importance of the LiDAR data going to low tide is more towards the hydrodynamics of the flooding that would occur at high tide, because when you have that high storm surge and waves are traveling over over that, you know, intertidal zone, they're on top of the bathymetry there, or the elevation in that intertidal zone. But previously we didn't have any data there, so we just had to assume it was something between the bathymetry data from the old soundings surveys, where some of the coves we only had like 1 or 2 data points, and we just assumed the whole cove was that depth. And so I think what we're going to see is the areas with mud flats are going to have much different results in this model than those areas where, you know, where it is a more steep shoreline. It's probably going to look pretty similar. So yeah, you are correct in the fact that we're more interested in high tide and flooding, but the flood that could occur during those times is, you know, in order to understand it, you need to have the data that goes down below low tide.
And I have one final question, which is for the town people in the room. Is that fan on behind Scott? Because I've been in meetings, hybrid meetings like this, and when I'm sitting like near where he is, you can't hear the people on Zoom because of that ventilator that's there, that's cranking away. And we've always looked at it and gone, how can we turn this off during a meeting?
Yeah,
and I don't hear it at all right now.
It's not too loud. It's very quiet today. I think it's
okay.
I don't think HVAC is working too hard right now.
Okay, thank you.
September, it's great time of year.
Dan, do you have any questions? So I think,
yeah.
I mean, unless anyone else has something to add, appreciate you both coming today, and your other person who was with us.
Yes.
And I think it's an important topic for Harpswell, and we have the most coastline of any municipality in Maine, so lots of impacts potentially here. And we look forward to this, going forward.
Yeah, no, we were definitely looking
We're
forward to
excited.
this.
Good.
It's gonna be a great project.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Step out for a moment.